is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Very good morning to you. It is 3 minutes after 10. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Coming up later in the programme, if there's time, I'd like to talk about laundry and pornographic mugs, believe it or not. There's a couple of lifeboat staff, volunteers actually, who've lost their appeal against dismissal over possession of pornographic mugs. And while I'm afraid I'm still of an age and a generation where I kind of snigger a bit at that sort of thing, I recognise that younger people are probably going to be able to give me a bit of an education as to why these things do matter rather more than people of my vintage sometimes realise. The laundry story involves a mother who likes to hang her laundry outside her house being rather rudely upbraided by an anonymous letter writer, and in response the entire Devon town has started hanging its smalls from the windowsills. I may, if there's time, ask you whose side you're on. We're also going to have another look at video games and crisis in care homes. But Brexit and Russia will be running through the programme like Blackpool through a stick of rock. I'll be joined at 10:30 by Carol Cadwallader, the multi-award-winning journalist, nominated yesterday, in fact, for the most prestigious investigative journalism award in the country. I'm going to find it very hard to pick a favourite, because Amelia Gentleman, the Guardian journalist who, of course, led the line on the Windrush reporting, is up for the same award. Carol's investigations into the Leave EU's associations with the Kremlin, and, of course, the role that Cambridge Analytica, founded by Steve Bannon, played in voter manipulation has, dominated the news agenda. But it's been such a slow burner that many of us perhaps didn't get on board soon enough. Speaking of that, there is a journalist called James Patrick coming in later in the programme as well, who pretty much wrote almost a year ago, pretty much predicted everything that's happened in this field in the space of the last few weeks. And because I was... sceptical isn't quite the right word. It was almost sort of pinch yourself territory. This can't be true. I kind of thought we owed him a visit to the studio to talk us through just how he managed to be so prescient. We'll get on with that in a moment. Before that, and I appreciate that a lot of the time I'm whistling in the wind when I say that we'd like to keep things friendly, but I generally mean it. It's only, really kind of violent stupidity that I think we should be attacking with vitriol. In terms of things upon which we can all agree, I'm close to suggesting that no one's got a clue what happened yesterday in the House of Commons, least of all the people that were involved in it. The pendulum seemed to swing so swiftly from one to the other that it was pretty much impossible to tell the time. I think that there are... and the thing is, I can only explain it as I see it, right? And the problem with Brexit, right through it, is that if you are a fundamentalist on the other side of the debate, I think every description I offer of it is going to offend you, even though they're accurate. And I sometimes think, in fact, social media somehow proves that the more accurate my description is, the angrier you get, because it's reality that you're infuriated by now. And of course, you get even angrier with me because I've been telling you for 2 years that this was going to happen. So you sort of go, oh, that O'Brien fella with his Brexit nonsense. Oh, I hate him. And then, 6 months later, oh, God, he was right about that as well. I hate him even more. Another 6 months. And, oh, no, crikey. They don't need us more than we need. It's why he said that as well. Oh, I hate him. I hate him even more. I kind of, as a Christian, live in hope that eventually the hate will turn to love and gratitude. Because I think what's happened now is that MPs want the right, in the event, and in the interests of peace and harmony, let's call it a theoretical event at this point. Let's not say it's inevitable, even though it is. Let's pretend it's theoretical, okay? In the event of the government arriving in a place where it is absolutely impossible to deny that the country will be worse off according to pretty much every material measure if it continues to seek to leave the European Union. This is what I think happened yesterday. And listen, you can phone in now, 0345 606 0973. Not just if you think I've got it wrong, but ideally I hope I've got it wrong. So what these rebels are doing, and I think there's culpability on both sides of the house, for heaven's sake, but what these rebels seem to me to be doing is saying, this is why I thought Philip Lee's statement yesterday was very interesting. What they're saying is, look, Brexit means Brexit. We're cracking on with it. We understand all of that. But if we reach a point where we can actually see what's on the table, whether it is a no deal or whether it is a deal, if we reach the point where we actually know, I can't just stop using phrases like cliff edge. What would you say when we know what's on the other side, right? Well, okay. So we reach a point where we know what's on the other side of Brexit. MPs are saying, in the event that when we can actually see what's on the other side of Brexit, in the event that it's really, really, really rubbish, could we please have the right to say don't do it? And that is where we are. Astonishingly, a majority in the House of Commons says no. And that is where things get really confusing, because that is where the ideology kicks in. Why wouldn't you want the right to say no to a really, really rubbish destination? I don't quite get that, except, of course, the fact that I used the word material. I said material measures, so everything measurable. Not the stuff that you can't measure, the stuff that is, if you like, emotions, the stuff that is feelings. So when you say, why on earth would you not want the right to stop it in the event of it being rubbish, they say, well, I'm not going to put on a funny voice, at least for the first few minutes of the programme. They say sovereignty, fish, blue passports, control, all of the things that aren't measurable. So I think that's where we are now. And what the rebels seem to think that Theresa May told them yesterday is, of course, you will have the right to sound the alarm, apply a brake, call time, if, when we can actually see what's on the other side, then it's awful. And I think even after all these months, I can't quite believe that it's that simple. Even after all these months, even having spoken to more people on the other side of the argument than anybody else in the country, I still can't quite believe that anyone could cheer for not having a brake on a car heading towards a brick wall, or a car heading towards moving out of a well-developed leafy suburb into a kind of apocalyptic wasteland, into Mad Max territory. And I'm not saying that is what we are doing, but what the MPs were asking for is the right to say no. And I think that if you will, I think that the MPs are a little bit embarrassed to admit it, because they can't really come out with the stuff that you can stick on a placard. They can't really say, I don't care how awful it is because sovereignty, because that involves admitting that it might be awful. And people in the country have started doing that. Ordinary punters have started doing that. They've started pretending that they knew it was going to be awful, and these intangible benefits that get filed under patriotism, sovereignty, control, utterly fallacious, actually, but very, very in the context of the Brexit debate, but very powerful feelings that people who don't like thinking much can really get stoked up about. That's, I think, what happened yesterday. And my starter for 10 this morning, very simply, is that what happened yesterday? 0345 606 0973. Do you feel, whether you're a fully paid up member of the Leave lobby, or whether you're somewhere in the middle, or whether you're utterly persuaded that the country has embarked upon a path to imminent oblivion, is that where we are now? It is simply the case that MPs want the right to say stop if it looks like we're going somewhere really, really stupid. And the government stroke the Brexit lobby don't want MPs to have the right to stop it, even if it looks as if we're doing something really stupid. And I hope I've managed to do... Stupid, I'm afraid, is a word to describe deliberately enfeebling and weakening the country. Jacob Rees-Mogg's own investment fund are opening a fund in Dublin at the moment in order to ensure that they have passporting rights after leaving the European Union. I kid you not. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you think you must have imagined, or it must have been made up. But the investment fund he co-founded, where he still works part-time, opening a fund in Dublin. You ask him why, if you get the chance. I already know. And you see that, and you know that someone like him would still even though his own company is making moves to protect their income post-Brexit because they know it will be damaged. Even that, he's very much the kind of person who would still come out with sort of 19th century platitudes that he thinks actually are more important than material measures. I think that is what happened yesterday. Do you agree? 0345 6060 973. Philip is in Sandbach in Cheshire. Philip, is that what happened yesterday?
Hello. Actually, I think you're distorting the whole issue of Brexit. We, the electorate, were asked by MPs for a very clear instruction.
I have been over this quite a few times. Can we confine ourselves to what happened in the House of Commons yesterday?
Yes, I think basically those Conservative MPs who are rebelling are traitors. They are betraying.
But they're just asking for the right to vote on something in the event that it's appalling.
No, not at all.
No, what is it then?
They received a very clear mandate.
No, I appreciate that, but we're talking about what happened yesterday, very, very specifically. Here's what I think, Philip, and then you can pick it apart, okay? But let's deal in the specifics. They have posited the notion, and we will keep it theoretical for the purposes of our conversation. They've posited the notion that the Prime Minister is not going to be able to conjure up anything that isn't demonstrably and considerably inferior to our current arrangements. If that becomes clear, they want the right to say, whoa, stop it. And the government or the parliamentary majority and people like you don't want them to have the right to put the brakes on if it becomes absolutely obvious that we're driving into a brick wall. Now, what's wrong with that analysis, do you think?
Yes, because the alternative they're suggesting would keep us in the EU by the back door.
No, but that's not what happened I'm talking very specifically about what happened in the House of Commons yesterday. They say we must have the right to apply the brake if it becomes absolutely obvious that we're driving into a burning building. And you say, no, even if we're driving into a burning building, we must not have a brake.
Yes, I agree, because...
Yeah, I thought you might, actually. Yes.
If the Prime Minister can't...
You did hear the words that came out of my mouth. I said, if we're driving into a burning building, Philip in Sandbach doesn't want us to not only apply the brake, he doesn't want us to even have a brake.
If Brexit means falling off a cliff edge, so be it.
I salute your honesty, Philip. I salute your honesty.
That's what we voted for.
Absolutely. We voted to fall off a cliff edge and to drive into a burning building.
We did indeed.
No, you're right, we did. Is there any way we can prove that you rang in of your own volition, that you're not an actor, that you haven't been put up to this? Because I'm now going to get bombarded with emails saying... oh, carefully handpicked and filtered from all the cowards who haven't got the guts to ring in themselves. Can we prove that you're real?
Yes.
How?
I'm actually a Brexiteer.
Well, I know that, Philip, because I speak to people like you every day, but other people aren't quite as honest as you are, and they still think that there's an intelligent analysis of the stuff you've just said.
I've stood for UKIP 4 times
there you
as
go.
a candidate.
You see?
I'm an ex-UKIPper.
Bingo. The real deal. What did you vote for? We voted for pain and oblivion. And just talk me through the positives, the things that, when I put on the scales, that we're going to be poorer, that we're not going to be able to trade with the largest single market in the world, that we're going to be damaged. Well, the outgoing head of the CBI says that large parts of the car industry today are going to go extinct if we don't stay in the customs union. So I put all that on the scales on this side, all the measurable materials.
You haven't mentioned immigration.
Exactly that. So you put on the other side the stuff that really makes it all worthwhile. Go.
Immigration is the greatest threat that's faced us.
Yes.
Since the Second World War.
It is.
Mass immigration.
Absolutely.
Mass immigration leads to third world ghettos.
It does. Yes.
And that's creating the enemy within.
Right, you are.
That's why.
Yes.
That's why we voted to leave.
It is. Yes.
It was a clear
ghettos and the enemy within. Yes.
And
so you're talking about ghettos of continental European people, like sort of Little Venice.
The open door to Europe is also an open door to the rest of the world.
But it isn't, though, is it?
What do you mean it isn't? We've had 20,000 Somalis come to Britain via the Netherlands.
Right. And how many of them are in Sandbach?
Sandbach is 98% white British.
Well, I suppose...
So my neighbourhood, fortunately, hasn't yet been affected.
No.
But around the southeast,
yes,
what you have essentially are
cesspits.
Third world cultures.
Do you know where? Because I'd quite like to go. I live in the southeast. Do you know where they are?
London is the worst example, obviously.
But I'm actually in the middle of London at the moment, and you're in Sandbach, and you're telling me that what I can see out of my own window is what is it, an illusion?
In most London boroughs...
Well, go on, talk me through which ones.
In most London boroughs...
Well, go on, talk me through which ones have you been to?
Like Lambeth, etc.
Lambeth?
Etc.
Where the Archbishop of Canterbury lives?
Whites are actually in a minority.
In a minority?
So in a minority. That's a great threat to social stability and
it is, but you know that the European Union contains no countries that are not majority white.
That's not the point.
What is the point?
The point is where you've got these large immigrant ghettos who are living
like in Lambeth
within their own cultures,
of French people and Italians and Spanish.
Moral framework. We end up with social with chaos,
right?
And a lack of social cohesion.
We do a lack of social cohesion. What does cohesion mean, Philip?
It means neighbourhoods coming together and communities coming together.
As long as they're not brown.
Subscribing. I happen to be an East African Asian myself.
Of course you do, Philip. Of course you do. And do you live in a ghetto?
No, I've chosen to live in a town that's 98% white British.
Right, you are. And are you the enemy within?
I'm an assimilationist.
Can you prove that you're not the enemy within, Philip?
A few of us, James.
Prove it, Philip.
To assimilate.
A few of us have chosen to assimilate. And there you have it. Just for the record, you are 100% real, Philip. And you've rang up entirely of your own volition, and you're not an actor or a stooge or anything like that. You're a 4-time UKIP candidate. Am I right or am I right?
I stood 4 times for UKIP. I'm no longer a member. I'm an ex-UKIPper.
Okay, mate.
I stood 4 times for UKIP.
Have a great day. It's 21 minutes after 10.
This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation. LBC with James O'Brien.
24 minutes after 10 is the time. I'm getting a lot of noise from Lambeth. Apparently there are Portuguese ghettos where practically the only food you can buy is pastel de nata. So, Philip possibly had a point. Be joined by Carol Codwallader in about 10 minutes' time to discuss some of her journalism. We'll just be discussing the journalism that's won her countless awards and a nomination for the Paul Foot Investigative Journalist of the Year Award. Coming up later in the programme, we'll have to wait and see. I'm wondering whether the analysis I offered, I think Philip agreed with it, it doesn't matter how awful it is, they don't want Parliament to have the right to put the brake on, because in his view, the country is full of Somalis. A real person. It's not funny, I know a lot of you are laughing. An awful lot of people on the other side of the argument are a bit confused at the moment, because that is who you're in bed with. That's who you're in bed with. Ian is in Leeds. Ian, what would you like to say? No, Ian's busy. Hassan's in Slough. Hassan, what would you like to say?
I just had to laugh at the last caller.
It's not funny, though. It's not funny.
It would have been fun if it wasn't so funny. He stood...
It would have been funny if it wasn't so funny. What sort of nonsense? What sort of word salad is this? Go on.
I'm trying to stoop to his level, you see. He stood 4 times for UKIP. I stood 5 times as a Tory. I'm not a Somali. I'm a Bangladeshi, and I'm a Remainer as well. I voted as for Remain. From what I understand from what Philip said, if he voted for Brexit in order to stop Somalis coming in,
yes,
that really, really makes sense. Really. Now, I, as a Remainer, do believe that Britain is going into a cesspit. Here's what cesspit actually means. It means an economic cesspit. The cesspit he's talking about are the multicultural cesspits. So let's look at the big picture here. I feel I voted Remain because we should be a part of Europe from an economic point of view, but we are heading down into a economic cesspit. But I hope that, as a Remainer, that we are proven wrong.
The analysis I offer of what happened yesterday, and I offer it very reluctantly. Obviously, I wasn't quite expecting to receive such a ringing endorsement from the first caller, but it is the case that if you had to try to explain it to somebody who's just come out of a coma, as they said, we've had a referendum, we voted to leave the European Union, and there is a significant lobby within Parliament and the land, represented in Sandbach by our new friend, but that they absolutely resist furiously the notion that we should have a break, even if it becomes utterly clear that we're driving into a burning building. Is that what happened yesterday? Is that what the rebels are saying? Please, can we have a break just in case? And the government has said no.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one. Because,
is it? Because I think that's quite simple. Oh, but you're a former Conservative candidate, so you don't want to portray the government in that way, do you, Hassan?
Well, I mean, there are disagreements within the Conservative Party, yeah. There are disagreements.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So, yes, James, you're absolutely right, but I couldn't possibly say so live on the radio, because who knows, Central Office might be listening, and I might have another crack at the whip one day.
You know what the bottom line is?
What?
I think the whole referendum was a complete mistake. David Cameron did what he did, for political expediency, and I completely understand that. But we won the seats. We're in government, but we have lost Britain. So I think holding the referendum was the biggest mistake that happened. So what happens afterwards, to me, is really immaterial.
Well, not to me. I understand what you're saying, and I'm going to squeeze in Ian in Leeds, but I don't. And then we'll meet Carol, and we'll probably come back to this later in the programme. But I don't just want to confine the conversation exclusively to that poor fella up in Cheshire. Ian is in Leeds. Ian, what would you like to say?
I think, when we talk about MPs having a meaningful vote,
yeah.
I think it seems to me that people want less rights as a nation than they would have as a consumer. I mean, if you bought, let's say, I don't know, a laptop or a mobile phone,
yes,
that didn't work, it kept crashing, etc., what would you do?
I'd take it back to the shop, yeah.
You get an exchange or you get a refund.
Yeah, but what they'd say in the shop is they say, I'm terribly sorry, sir, it's the will of the customer. It's yours. You have to keep it.
Well, this is the situation we're in. People would not accept it as a consumer.
It's the will of the customer. It's the will of the customer, sir. I'm terribly sorry that when you got your box home and opened it, it didn't have a laptop computer inside, but had an apple, an actual fruit apple, rather than a laptop apple. But it's the will of the customer, sir. I'm afraid you voted for it when you took the box out of the shop.
And let's see how long that store would stay in business.
It doesn't matter, though, does it? Because it's almost as if, and I'm glad we can chuckle in, it's almost as if we're playing football with two teams that haven't actually agreed on what the rules are.
Yeah, well, you see...
Goal! I've scored! Donald Trump then comes in saying, I'm going to score some amazing goals, and the crowd goes crazy. They don't even need to see the goals. They just need to hear him say, I'm going to score some amazing goals.
This is what makes me laugh when I hear Brexiters say, well, I knew exactly what I voted for, considering that this is brand new territory. Yeah. No other country has left the EU. This is completely unprecedented.
I know.
There have been no pre-written rules, and yet they say they knew what they voted for.
I got one this morning saying Canada didn't get anything until they threatened to walk away, and you sort of think, I can't even begin to explain to you how stupid that is. Canada is not in the European Union. We walk away, we drive our car to the garage, open negotiations for a new car, and then threaten to walk away after our old car has already been scrapped.
Well, there you are. I mean, it's a crazy situation. It's an absolutely crazy situation. And, just before we go, I'd like to say to Philip in Sandbach, there were ghettos in this country before Britain joined the EU. There were Jewish ghettos. There were ghettos of
I don't know what he means. He doesn't mean that when he says ghettos. He means something that only exists in the imagination of people that write for the fake news sites like Breitbart and Infowars. They're not real. It's not. It's like I said. It's people living in Cheshire in 98% white areas that think places like Hounslow, where I live, is some sort of hell on earth. It's nuts. But how do you help him? Lambeth, the mean streets of Lambeth. 10:31 is the time. Thomas Watts is here now with the headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
10:35 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I've just heard from Nimco Ali, my friend, and the tireless anti-female genital mutilation campaigner. She's got a special message for Philip in Sambat. She says she's currently at Warren Street, and she, as far as she can tell, she is the only Somali in the region, so he can relax. Carol Cadwallader on her way to the studio. She's coming by bicycle. So I'm not quite sure when she'll be getting here, but it should be before 11 o'clock to bring us up to speed with the journalism that has seen her nominated yesterday for the Paul Foote Award from Private Eye Magazine for investigative journalism. And speaking of Private Eye Magazine, shall I read you, because it's just hit the newsstands, I'll read you that thing about old Jacob Rees-Mogg. Hardline Brexiteer Jacob Rees-Mogg has been prominent in resisting the Lords' amendments to the EU withdrawal bill that would keep the UK in the customs union. The Tory MP supports threatening to walk away with no deal if necessary to ensure the UK leaves the EU. However, over at fund manager and his part-time employer Somerset Capital Management, which he co-founded, there seems to be much less equanimity about Brexit. Never mind the Rees-Mogg cliff edge version. Far from excitedly eyeing investment prospects beyond the EU, SCM seems firmly in the Remain camp. Like many city banks, insurers and asset managers, SCM relies on passporting from the UK's EU membership to sell in other EU countries. That could all come to an end with Brexit. EU chief negotiator Michel Barnier insists there will be no special deal, putting city firms at a big disadvantage. Moves to Paris, Frankfurt, Luxembourg and Dublin can get round that problem. No doubt this is why SCM has launched a new investment fund based in Dublin, a major fund management centre, even though that means submitting to Irish, EU laws and regulations. So, just attempting to nail down what happened, that kind of plays into my analysis of what happened in the House of Commons yesterday, in that the rebels, as they've become called, are simply seeking to have a break if it becomes clear that we're driving to a very silly and dangerous place. But because the Brexit now has become so ideological as opposed to measurable, it's about the feels rather than the facts, significant numbers of hard Brexit people don't want a break. They just don't want a break. There were obviously slightly comic elements to the first contributor who rang in to completely agree with me from the perspective of being a hard Brexiter on the grounds that there are too many Somalians living here. But on a more serious note, Jacob Rees-Mogg's in the same camp. His own investment fund is opening up an operation in Dublin so that it can benefit from the trading arrangements we currently have and which he thinks we should abandon. Because the feeling that you get from leaving is going to be more powerful and more important than all of the measurable material losses. And I think that's all that happened. And I think that we can agree on this. Alan is in Chesham. Alan, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I was getting hypnotised by Philip and Sambach. I almost forgot what I wanted to talk about.
Do you know how egotistical I am? I actually now am getting slightly irritated by the fact that everyone's going to be talking about him instead of me today. Carry on.
I think I know what's going on.
Yes.
So I think what happened yesterday with the deal that Mrs May put forward to Grieve and the other rebels, let's call them the Rebel Alliance, was such that she could avoid angering the Brexiteers. Because the Brexiteers' key position is that they will do what Rees-Mogg suggests and walk away if they have to. So if we ended up with a situation where we'd already put in law, I mean, I'm talking about this from being a hard Remainer, and I'm still campaigning to remain.
Yes.
But I can see it from their point of view. If you put it in law, their paranoia kicks in, and they will think, oh, the EU will naturally offer us the worst possible deal and bully us into staying because, after all, we can't accept this terrible position that we've already foreseen.
Yes.
See what I'm saying?
I think you're possibly giving them too much credit. I think that for a lot of them, especially the rich ones, which is most of them, isn't it? Most of the very powerful and prominent ones. John Redwood advising investors to get their money out of Britain after the vote while insisting to people in this country that it was the right thing to do. Jacob Rees-Mogg's investment fund, the one that he founded and still puts in a few hours, I think, part-time, shifting an operation to Dublin so that it can avail itself of European Union regulations. The bloke who was in front of the Select Committee yesterday, apparently owning diamond mines and all sorts of interests in gold. All of these people are going to be absolutely fine. So they can actually sort of say, I don't care if the financial situation diminishes. They're happy with a no-deal Brexit because it delivers an emotional jolt. It's like Viagra for the politically flaccid.
You're also giving them a little bit too much credit in that you're attributing this emotional thrust towards everything they're doing. You know, what
else is there, though? What else is there?
What you just described, and you read out that piece from Private Eye.
Yes.
You know, Jacob Rees-Mogg can have the ultimate cakeism. You know, he can set up an office for his hedge fund investment fund in Dublin, take advantage of everything that's going on within the EU, while at home, you know, the Britain then goes through this period of disruption. I mean, Brexit is like Uber. It's a disruptive technology that is going to just shake up the economy and allow hedge funds to sort of make the money in the gaps that open up. So it's cakeism for them. You know, they get to do exactly what they want, whereas ordinary people who lose their rights to work abroad, you know, don't have the opportunity to sort of like trade across the borders like that.
And the House of Commons yesterday essentially delivered, or what the rebels sought to secure, was simply the right to say stop when what you've just described becomes, if what you've just described became obvious before we actually came out. So if before March 29, all but the most gammony of gammons would be nodding along with you now and saying, yeah, do you know what, I still think it could have gone better. I still think if we'd done this and this, it would have been the right thing to do. This is what my friends are saying now who voted to leave. And I think they might be right. You could still, like, imagine a Norway option as they did, and I said, there's no way that these people like Philip are going to go along with freedom of movement. Just trust me on this. But we'll let them believe that it could have been done in a better way. When everybody save the most gammony of gammons, recognises what you've just described, what the rebels in the House of Commons were seeking to secure yesterday was simply to establish the existence of a break. And these people, the hard Brexit lobby, the ERG and others, they absolutely furiously resist the idea that there should ever even be a break. And that's where we are. That's where we're breaking it down.
Just like, it's exactly the same situation as we found ourselves last week with David Davis threatening to resign because there was going to be he wanted to have an end date, and May said, no, there shouldn't be an end date. You know, he wants there to be absolute clarity.
Yes.
Right? And, you know, they will not accept this sort of like fallback position where we act to protect ourselves.
And that's where you'd hope, and I suspect it's a forlorn hope, but that's where you'd hope that everybody would sort of just pause for a moment, wouldn't you? So, well, look, if we've got a break, it doesn't mean we're going to use it. But and you hear somebody say on live radio, yes, I want to carry on driving into that building, even if it is on fire. And you sort of think, well, you've got the whole country in the car with you. Why would anybody not just want the existence of a break? And that's when you come back to the psychodrama of enemy territory. They're our enemy. They're our enemy. We've got to get away from them. And that's the bit that I think, even if we stayed online talking about this every day for 10 years instead of just 2, people like you and me are never going to quite be able to understand that mindset, are we?
No, you're absolutely right.
I don't think we should stop trying.
No. Well, everybody should get out on June the 23rd and March.
Yes, I mean, this is the people's vote, the big march that's mooted for June the 23rd. We'll talk a little bit more about that as it looms ever closer. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Of course, another one, the fellow, one of the big backers of Brexit, Crispin Odey, another hedge fund tycoon, has taken out more than £500 million of so-called short positions on some of Britain's biggest firms, implying that he expects a poor performance from them after Brexit. People aren't going to make a huge amount of money. Ordinary folk, that dreadful phrase, like me, don't really understand how you make money out of things going badly. But it is just a bet, isn't it? You put a bet on a share price. If it goes down, you win. And he's got 500 million quid's worth of his investors' money bet on things going badly. He, of course, was a prominent Brexit backer, just as Jacob Rees-Mogg was, whose investment fund are now opening up in Dublin because they need to have an outlet under which European Union passporting rights are retained. But, you know, and it's not even funny anymore, is it, when I go, fish?
This is LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
10:48 is the time. Lots to get through today. I can't criticise you, Steve, because it was my analogy, but this just, mate, I've got no idea what this means, mate. We have a break, James. We have a government that we elected to apply the brakes if necessary. What you want is a dual control brake, so this isn't about you wanting a brake, it's about you not trusting the government to use their brake if necessary. I think you're right, but there's something in the phraseology that seems a little mean, so I don't know for 100% certainty that you are right. 10:49 is the time. Carol Cadwallader, the award-winning journalist, is with me in the studio now. I'm very glad you managed to get into the studio unmolested, Carol. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to see you here. And you are here to talk us through the reasons why you have just been nominated for the Paul Foot Award for Investigative Journalism over at Private Eye. And it is to do with the links between Leave EU, the Kremlin, and Cambridge Analytica. But I'd like, if we can, to begin at the very beginning, because I followed it perhaps a little more closely than many. And I have to confess to you, there have been a couple of occasions where I've wondered how you carried on, where there's so much scepticism in the industry, let alone, I know you were on Mar and that Isabel Oakeshott person accused you of chasing unicorns while she was in possession of documents that suggested at least some of what you were saying was demonstrably true. What are you made of?
The thing is that I've just had facts on my side, so that's been the sort of the thing that I've just relied upon, really, which is that sort of all the takedowns of me are political. You know, I get this sort of it's a Ramona conspiracy. And, you know, that's. I mean, I'm not interested. I mean, I very much keep away from the kind of like, this is Remain, this is Leave.
You don't
this is
have
the
a
law. This
strong
is the law.
position
This
on
is the law.
Right.
Well, I keep very much a kind of like there's a definite separation.
Yes.
That's, you know, what I'm chasing is breaches of electoral law, breaches of data law. You know, coordination between campaigns.
Well, all of which is still denied by the people that you've investigated.
Yes, all of it's still denied. Although there's now multiple. I mean, I can run through it. There's multiple investigations by multiple bodies. It's a car crash. It's an absolute car crash of potential law breaking. It's. I was going to use a ruder word then.
Well, don't, because we are live.
Yes.
When did you get the first whiff of rat?
The first whiff of rat came very early on, and that was, I wrote, it was sort of the week after Donald Trump was elected, and I started looking at fake news, and I was writing this piece about Google, and I discovered, I was talking to this academic, and we were talking about the ways that information was being manipulated on the internet. And he was freaked out, and I was freaked out, because we both found this kind of like really disturbing content. And he said, oh, there's this company, Cambridge Analytica, you know, which worked for Trump and it worked for the Leave campaign. And, you know, what they do is they can use these kind of far-right sites to embed cookies, follow you around the internet, track your movements, know everything about you, and then target you with this kind of personalised propaganda.
Just while you were cycling here, we took a call from a fella in Cheshire who proudly described himself as living in a 98% white area, but is utterly terrified of Somalians who have come here on Dutch passports. That's the kind of story that you're talking about.
Yeah, well, actually, because in fact I can go one step back and I can say on the day that the referendum result happened, I happened to be on my way to Wales for another story. I'm from Wales. And they said, go somewhere and, you know, do a report for us. And I was kind of thinking, where shall I go? And I ended up going to Ebbw Vale. And I went to Ebbw Vale because of the sort of Aneurin Bevan connection.
Yes, of course,
kind of classic, you know, Welsh Valley's heartland. And it was such a gobsmacking thing because Ebbw Vale is like this distressed old steel town, which has been rebuilt from the ground up by EU money. So it's got these gleaming, like, FE college there. It's got a new railway station. It's got a new motorway. It's got a new railway line. It's got new sports facilities. And it's all everywhere around town. It's like built by the EU, supported by the EU.
9 of the 10 poorest regions in the EU are in the United
And yet,
Kingdom.
when I went round town, everybody, and it's also got really low levels of immigration. I mean, there's a few Poles who work in the factory, and that's it.
Yes.
But everybody, when I was asking them what the reasons were, they told me it was immigration. And what was really fascinating to me, okay, I'm from Wales.
Yes.
My cousins are big, like, with solid Labour, you know, voters from Swansea. And my cousins were Leave voters. But it was this thing that my cousin Richard, he would never read, as he would say, at the Tory press. He took the piss out of me for years because I used to. Sorry, he took the mickey out of me.
We had Peter Jukes on earlier in the week, and he had a potty mouth as well.
He took the mickey out of me for working with the Daily Telegraph because the thing is that the Tory press, as he calls it, has no traction in Wales.
Yes.
And yet, when I was in Ebbw Vale, everybody was giving me these lines which are straight out of the Mail and the Sun.
Right.
And I was like, oh, this is really curious that these messages have completely got through.
Yes.
In an area where they just wouldn't have that before, and particularly when there was like local press and it was people stuck to their sort of tribal.
And this was all coming through their
and
social media.
That was the first thing which
Right.
started me thinking about.
How have they received these messages? How has this bloke in Ebbw Vale or this bloke in Sandbach ended up convinced that there's an imminent invasion of Somalians that is somehow linked to the European Union membership?
There was this guy on the ground standing in front of his all-weather football pitches. It's a tiny town. It's a tiny town with these amazing facilities. And he was sort of like, well, the thing is, what's the European Union ever done for us? And I was like, well...
And it was all there.
And I was like, well, do you honestly think that, like, Boris Johnson, because that's who we were looking at then, that if there's a Tory government, that they're going to look out for you more than Europe has. Europe has funneled this money into these distressed areas of Britain in a way which a Conservative government just wouldn't have. And that was one of the sort of first things I started thinking about.
You highlight some appalling flaws in the Remain campaign, actually, don't you, when you point this stuff out? The fact that these messages hadn't got through in the run-up to the referendum, despite the evidence being in front of people.
You know why, James? Because the more I look at it, it's because they did stuff legally. I mean... Well, they did stuff, certainly, which hasn't been challenged by investigators.
All allegations of illegality and criminality have been denied and continue to be so, but we shall watch this space. So then you started digging. Then you started wondering how people like your cousin had ended up being fed an almost unleavened diet of often fake propaganda.
Just before the American election, so just before, the week before, I was like looking at all these weird stuff which was going on. And I thought, oh, God, isn't this interesting? You can see, like, technologies... In the way that I'd just been at this conference in San Francisco, tech conference, and it was called Tech Crunch Disrupt. It was all about like disrupting. Everybody was disrupting something. Like the way the media industry has been disrupted, and the way the music's been disrupted. And everybody at this conference was like disrupting. Like they're all trying to disrupt all sorts of things. And I was just sort of and I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, oh, this is really interesting. It's like technology is disrupting politics here, isn't it? And then I sort of Googled it, and I was like, oh, nobody's written about this. And so I just wrote a little opinion piece before. And then we had, and it's because if you disrupt politics, of course, you disrupt democracy.
Yes.
And that's the basic problem. That's what's happened. So everything we saw...
Because an informed electorate is a prerequisite of anything close to democracy, and a completely misinformed deliberately misinformed
fundamentally, what we have now is absolutely undemocratic, and I can say that across all spectrums of what's happening in politics, because it's happening in darkness. So the whole thing is being mediated by these tech giants, These adverts are going through the servers of Google and Facebook, and we have no idea what goes on inside them. They are absolutely unaccountable by law. And
because the technology has galloped away and the law has been left behind, it's not a conspiracy or deliberate. It's just a failure to keep up.
That's exactly what it is. So the tech giants have come along, technology which has been so kind of like enabling and empowering for all of us, and a wonderful thing. And we all sat back for a few years and went, "Isn't this amazing? God, this new Apple iPhone's like fantastic."
Yes.
And maybe we're all going to come together and the crowd will cure cancer. and then we forgot that maybe there are ways which this same technology can be used for circumventing laws and regulations that fundamentally were established in the 19th century. So our electoral laws, in the 19th century, there were lots of people running around, and they'd just like sling around money and get people drunk, and that would be how you'd win an election.
There's a pub around the corner. It's not a pub anymore, it's a Wagamama now, but the Intrepid Fox, who was a politician who was famous for bribing voters with beer.
Exactly.
That's why they brought in these laws.
That's why they brought in these laws.
And they're the ones that still apply.
They had a sort of set of terrible elections which were, and they were like, okay, we've got to do something about this. And we haven't yet reached that point. That is literally what is happening now across the world, particularly in Britain, because in America, they don't bother controlling money in their elections. They've lost that battle, whereas we do. This is the way we keep people straight. That is absolutely the bedrock of everything. And we have no way, there is absolutely no way now of controlling money that goes into our elections.
You'll stay with us for a little longer.
Yeah.
We'll take some news. Phone lines are open. Is there anyone that you'd refuse to talk to on principle if they were minded to ring in?
No, bring it on.
Absolutely anyone involved in the story at all?
Bring it on. No,
Yeah?
I don't think. If
Okay.
anybody,
I just want to clarify.
Yeah. It's a good clarification.
03456060973 is the number needed for anybody involved in the story who would like to pick up on anything that Carol has said. The time is approaching 11 o'clock. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we will continue, actually after the news, we'll start looking at what you began to unearth as these investigations continued. I'm not moving away from Brexit. I'm still interested in whether or not anybody listening wants to unpick my suggestion that what we're looking at now is a furious refusal on the part of hard Brexiters, if you like, to allow Parliament to have a break. It's not just applying the break, they don't want a break. They want it to be the case that the government can press on with any result, regardless of how much evidence is accrued suggesting that the result is undesirable or bad or simply inferior to what we currently have. We'll return to that at some point in the programme. There's lots of other stuff I want to talk about as well before 1 o'clock. I'd quite like to have another crack at Fortnite, if everyone's up for it.
On your radio, on your phone, and here.
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.